So without further ado, without me continuing to rattle along, please join me in welcoming Sevetri Wilson to the stage.
It's a blessing. I done leveled up now, view panoramic. None of my fears can't go where I'm headed. Had to cut them loose, now blues break
Oh
the
my
living.
goodness, Sevetri, how are you? I'm.
Good.
Y'all too quiet. She said,
I know. How y'all doing?
Oh, are you excited for us this weekend?
I am excited. 2-year hiatus and we're back, right? And clearly this room echoes that same sentiment. We're back.
Absolutely, we're back. So, one of the things as we were getting ready for your interview, a lot of times when we think about the path to entrepreneurship, usually folks maybe come from working in a corporate and then they make this pivot. But with you,
That was crazy.
I feel like you've always been an entrepreneur. Is that pretty accurate?
Pretty accurate outside of probably like my first 2 years out of college.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
What gave you, how did you even get down that path? How you were like, I'm actually just going to starting my own things. Did you know, where did you get this entrepreneurial courage maybe?
So I think that sometimes with youth, you think that you really can do anything and take on the world. So I don't know if some of it was just being naive.
And sometimes that's a great thing. Because
Yes.
sometimes I'm like, I know too much now.
Yeah, you have less fear,
Yeah.
right? Because you, in many ways, haven't experienced so much of life, right? And
Absolutely.
we think about going down the journeys, ups and downs that you go on through entrepreneurship, even through the corporate America. World in that space. And so for me, I was like, okay, I'm going to start a business because I think I can, right? I can do this. I can do that. I can help people find solutions to their problems.
And you grew up where your father was an entrepreneur, right?
Yes.
You observed him. How much did you, because you were young, but how much do you remember observing him and remembering what that was like for him?
Yeah, so my father had a cement business, and I was so young. So he passed away when I was young, but I just remember just the aura of him with his workers and his team. And I always say that I have the business mind of my father, and I hope to have the heart of my mother.
I love that. I love that sentiment of how you can bridge those two paths together, right? And speaking of your mom, I know she passed away while you were young as well. What do you remember her doing for a career and work? What do you remember about that?
So it's interesting because my mother was not an entrepreneur. She worked, and I don't know if some of y'all might be too young to remember Kmart. So my mom was assistant manager at Kmart, right, when that was still a thing. And I just watched her work so hard. And so when I went off to college, a lot of what I was doing, I was actually trying to build a future for my mother because I felt that she deserved so much more. And so my mother unexpectedly was diagnosed with cancer in October, and she ended up passing away December 21st of that same year, right before Christmas. Ooh. And so I had to readjust, what am I doing all of this for if she's no longer here?
Whew, that's heavy. Especially at a young age, right?
Yeah.
You're trying to figure everything out.
But I did, and I think a lot of what I still do, right? I always say that even in death, she continues to give me life, and I think that's what matters.
I love that. I love how you channel that energy.
Yeah.
Tell me about when you were in school. You probably wouldn't describe it this way, but when we were in school at LSU, you quote unquote started your first business.
I did. Oh my gosh, like that. I always say, well, technically,
and it was, correct me, it was Black News Our Way, right?
BNOW.
BNOW.
But some people they were BNOW employees, baby. You hear me? At 18, in this audience.
So, we had a lot of new tech that was coming up when we were in college, and I know maybe some Gen Z in the audience might laugh at us.
We were on Facebook without a face.
Exactly.
Yeah,
there's no profile, literally. And you started this newsletter. What were you thinking you wanted to do with it? Did you want to just disrupt media? Were you even thinking that? Or were you just I just want to tell our stories?
So I just wanted to tell our stories, but I wanted to bring together students from LSU, where I was, and Southern, because I felt that we were so much alike and also so uniquely different. But there was a little bit of tension between.
Yeah, it was made up tension.
Right, exactly, made up tension. But particularly between just the Black students, I was we have way more in common, right, than we have that separates us. And so I started just reaching out to writers, and I enlisted some of my friends to be writers. And I had friends who built websites and who did my logo. And I was like, look, all I got is $25 for this logo. But it was the best, Jamar. I remember he was like, okay, I'm going to flip it to you. But, it's going to take me at least 3 days. I know you need it tomorrow.
3 days.
Yeah.
Think about that right now. You think you get a logo in 3 days right now?
Yeah, and then I don't know if you remember Terry. He actually did my website
Yes,
with Jonathan
Terry
Rayford.
Griffin.
Yes. So they did my website, and we pulled it together. I got a friend of mine, Scott, to do our photos on the west side of campus. Like, we really put something together.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Already at that age, you already were comfortable, like, pulling different people together and recognizing their strengths, being comfortable with, like, hey, I can't do that, but maybe they can.
Mm-hmm.
Where did you get maybe that confidence in being able to lead that way? Like, because, I feel like a lot of us sometimes struggle with, like, I got to do everything.
Yeah.
Where did that come from?
Now, I still say, even then, I didn't feel like I didn't have people around me who could help me. I'm more of a, if it doesn't get done, I'll do it, right? But I don't want to do it. But if it don't get done, I can do it. But I do think it comes from just really being a sponge of knowledge and really watching leaders around me and how they maneuver and how they work. And I remember like Dr. Leonard Moore, he was like, if you do something you're passionate about, you don't watch the clock. And all those things really stood with me as I was coming up. And so my natural personality is like, how do you execute it? What do I need to execute it? Who do I need to execute this?
Yeah. And I think you have to realize, like, maybe you have the vision, but sometimes we don't also have the skill set to do some of these things, right? It's like, I might want to design this beautiful house, but I'm not a carpenter. I don't know how to do that.
I built a tech company. I'm not a technical founder. So I can't code a line. So
Right.
There you go.
Solid Ground Innovations,
Yes.
SGI, which is, technically your second venture. We're just going to keep using this technical
BNOW is
word.
first, yes.
And this was started when you were 22. You were out of school at this point?
Yes,
Yeah, out of
I
LSU.
had graduated LSU at this point.
Yeah. And SGI was a nonprofit management and consultancy agency, right? And rumor has it you started this without any money. This was just all labor and sweat.
Bootstrap, that's what we call it.
Bootstrap. So how did you get into that path? Like, why go from, the newsletter? Clearly there's some connection there, but what was the inspiration?
So I was working, I did work somewhere.
You did work somewhere.
I was working at CASA, so Court Appointed Special Advocates, and I was doing a lot of work just advocating for foster children at the Capitol. I was working with a lot of various partners, and we actually approached the mother of Tyrus Thomas to be essentially like a spokesperson to help. And through that, we were trying to get more Black male volunteers for the Black boys, because that was the highest population that were in foster care at the time. And so I actually approached her, and I was like, I'm going to try to approach Tyrus. But fun fact, Tyrus is actually a writer from BNOW. People don't know that.
Wait, really?
His rookie year, he actually wrote a column talking about his rookie year with the Bulls.
That's
incredible. I had to throw that in there.
Yeah.
So I approached his mother to do this. And through that, Tyrus was like, actually, I'm trying to do some work in Chicago. And start a foundation and do some work in South Baton Rouge, where I'm from.
Right.
And so I started like helping him on the side, and then Work Done reached out to me, and then so my first entree and starting Solid Ground actually came from athletes through their foundations. Lolo Jones, like the list went on and on for a while.
And a lot of this was coming from the network from LSU.
From LSU,
right?
Yeah.
And this was at a young age, but in tandem with that, before I even, because I do want to ask you about, I feel like you're a power networker, so I want to get into that a little bit. But you also landed like this big Medicaid contract while doing this. So was anyone guiding you when you were like in some of these big conversations? You're 22. You're incredibly smart, but it's still like a new and different space. Like, how did you know what to do?
So two things, like two quick stories. One, I met a man named John Matthews, who at the time ran Opportunity Louisiana Small Business Development. So that's Louisiana Economic Development, their office. And he spoke at this conference in which there were probably like 500 people in the room. And he was talking about all the services and resources that the Economic Development Office gives for free to small businesses, right? And so he was like, nah, I say all that to say, but I know ain't nobody gonna come see me. So, and so I emailed him, and within 3 days, like later, the next week, I came to see him. He was like, you're the only person out of 500 people who came to see me. And he began to open my eyes to government contracting. And so I remember my first proposal for a communications RFP, and we spent so much time on this RFP, and we thought we was killing it. And so we submitted, and we ended up losing. We were like, oh, the system's rigged. They just don't want us to be great.
It was always them.
Exactly.
Never us.
But I knew someone in the office, and I was like, well, I would love to just see other proposals. So he was like, all right, come in, we're going to set up a meeting, give you opportunity to see these proposals. And I went through the proposal. I was like, man, our proposals suck. I would have gave me this contract.
But you need to see what everyone else is doing, right? Because we don't necessarily know, right? And I do the same thing. Like when we were like very early before we got real into it and had expertise, shout out to Purvey, of folks that knew what these expectations were. I was like, if I could get a proposal from anyone that has landed six-figure deal, I want to see what it looks like, right? Because I want to know how I need to approach that conversation. Absolutely. Sounds like that's what
I needed that, because I was like, whoo, this humbled me real fast. We had spent so much time on it, though. But regardless, we had missed the mark completely. And so when we went after the Aetna Better Health contract, when they were coming to Louisiana to provide Medicaid, first and foremost, I had used some of the things that John Matthews had taught me. He was like, go get certified, go do this, go do that. And they actually found my company on a certification list. And so they picked 3 companies off of that list, and they asked us to put together proposals, and we ended up winning the bid, which was a multi-million-dollar bid over the course of 5 years. And it changed the trajectory of the company.
Right, because now you can then staff against that, right? You can hire people, you can expand your operation. That's crazy. Yeah. Were you 22 when that all went down?
I was probably like 27, 26 maybe. That's around that time.
That's still crazy. Yeah. Multi-million-dollar deal.
Yeah. It was a good one. Then we started going at that. We were like community coffee. We started picking up everybody at that point. Because sometimes all you need is that one.
You need one to pay attention, and then you can leverage that to. But you also had to be good.
Yeah, and also we knew our community, and they were coming in to Medicaid, and they needed to be grassroots. They needed people to sign up for their plan, and they were like, you all knew the community, and you knew grassroots organizations, and people trusted you. Yeah. And so that was one of the deciding factors on top of our proposal why they went with us. Wow. Yeah.
So now I do want to get to this question about your networking, because you had mentioned that you went from that, and then you picked up coffee brands, and you picked up these other corporations. How do you approach like building these relationships or even getting in touch with these people? You going on, maybe now, are you going on LinkedIn, or is it like it's literally folks you're connecting with, you're going to events, and then what happens?
So I'm definitely a believer of going to events. I remember when I was raising capital for my second company, and I would look at various different conferences, and in Louisiana, there's just we're a funding desert in many ways, when you think about other places. And I was like, oh man, I want this investor, right? And I would fly out to San Francisco and wait till that investor finished their panel, and I'll be standing outside like, can I get your card? And tell them about themselves and how we would be a good investment. And so big believer in like doing what you need to do to get in front of the right people. Something else, even for SGI, Rod West, who's the current president of Energy Corporation, big boss, and I met him because I was actually sitting at CC's coffee house with a friend of mine, Theo, also LSU. He was like, man, it would be good if you met Rod, because he'd be real cool, but he couldn't make the intro. And so, sometimes you can't make the intro, but you'd be like, man, I met that person, and it would be good if you knew him. And so I actually went on Google, and I started searching his name and all these different, email addresses, and his email popped up on the presentation, and I emailed him, and he responded. And so he was like, I don't know how you got past my gatekeepers, but since you're here, come meet with me. And so there's so many different ways that I have, just networked when we think about like business wise, but just even also with my peers. And like Issa Rae said something that people would tell her, why don't you reach out to Oprah? And she was like, well, I got people who do that.
Right.
And so I'm a believer of networking across, but also networking up, right? Because I think there's a balance that you have to strike when you're trying to get places.
It's huge. It gets, a lot of times it gets underestimated how much happens with our peers.
Yes.
Right? Like we spend so much time thinking like, oh, we're competitive. It's like, no, really, it's community.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
if you think about it, if you're trying to get somewhere, you got to work together, right? In order to get it done. And so I love that you mentioned that, because that's also been true in our story of how we've been able to even get here today, right? We work with a lot of peers to do this today. One of the things I think about that you're really great at is you're very clear on what you want. And I mean, in regards to when you're going to speak with someone about it, right?
For sure.
And I think a lot of times it can be hard for some people to get a direct ask.
Yes.
Sometimes it's like beating around the bush, or like, I don't know if I want to like come out right and say, hey, I need $50,000 you're willing to invest, or this is how much it is for my services. How do you work through that? What advice would you have for working through getting to a clear ask and being able to be direct with people?
So you have to go in prepared. So even when I started meeting with some of my mentors and Rod, I would know exactly what we were going to talk about in my head, like a little agenda, because I always wanted to come prepared, but also I didn't want to leave without making some type of ask, even if it was something that wasn't related to business, right? And so for me, I think that individuals, when they go in and they speak to people, a lot of people just don't like asking for things. They don't like asking for money. And not only do we not make the ask, we generally don't ask for enough, right? And that's why people don't take you seriously. And so I think you have to be very firm and know not only what you need, but then what are you going to need down the road too, right? So you can build upon what you're doing. And, Alfred Edmond, who is over at Black Enterprise, he said something to me, and he said, people will invest in you, but eventually they're going to want a return on their investment, meaning that they want you to do what you said you were going to do, right? And then people will continue to double down on you if you do. And so I think about all those things related to being able to just be like firm and like stand in it, right? And not be like fearful, because at the end of the day, if you want to move forward, the worst they can do is tell you no.
It's the worst.
You're gonna get a lot of no's, so I mean that's just what it is.
It took a long time in my experience to get to the place where it was okay to get a no and just keep it moving.
Yeah,
It didn't mean that whatever the idea that I had at the time was wrong or bad. It just meant that it wasn't for them, right? And it took a lot of time to like get to the place where it's like, it's actually not me. Like it's not good. It's not bad. It's literally just not for them. This is not the right pair. And when the right pairing shows up, the right investor, the right partner shows up, you're like, oh, this is why the other one wouldn't have worked.
Just be ready.
You just be ready.
Yeah.
As you've been in this industry and as an entrepreneur, working with different corporations, a lot of times, do you see other women that look like you in these rooms, in these conversations, or is it still very dominant white males? What's the landscape?
I mean, it's still very dominant white men. However, I think that the tide we're seeing changes, and I feel that women in many ways really are like building their own tables. And so in that light, not so much, but the tables, they still look very not like me. So that's for sure. But there's definitely more women than even when I first started my tech company, right, at the table than there was. And I think it's because we're like trying to pull people to the table, because we're like, oh, we're the only people here? Oh, I'll be back.
I'll be back. I love that. Now thinking in this experience, right, everything hadn't worked out, right? You've had some things along the way, and you're like, maybe I could have done that better. Is there a mistake that you remember to this day that was so significant, but also so impactful for how you move forward after it? Like, what comes to mind?
Everything. Probably the fundraising journey. I think it's probably one of the most humbling journeys of my career, just raising capital, because it's a nonstop like just moving the goalposts, right?
Okay.
And no's, etc. And people will say, well, Sevetri, you raised some money, so I don't know what you're complaining about because you've actually done it. However, I think that I've learned so much along the way, in regards to like where I spend my time, understanding when someone doesn't say a no, but they don't respond to your email a couple times, you probably need to move on. Even with negotiating and term sheets when you're trying to get the capital in, right? And how people can still waste your time in that. There's so many things that I've learned along the process of fundraising and raising capital for the company that have taught me so many lessons. And I think about, how do I inform more people so they don't make the same mistakes that, I've made or I've seen others make. And then also like leaning on people who've kind of been there and done that.
That's a big one. Is I think a lot of us don't realize someone's done this before in a different way. It may not be one-to-one, but they've raised money before, right? And so it's like, hey, can you give me like this roadmap of like, what does this look like? And we talk about it a lot in entrepreneurship. We talk a lot about it in the corporate side. And it's like, if you have someone who quote unquote sponsors you, right? This is literally someone's like, I've been here. I'm going to give you word for word, step for step what I've done. Now, it doesn't mean that it's going to happen exactly how they did it, right? Because the landscape is different now.
Yes.
But your success is a lot higher if you have someone that's been there that can provide perspective.
Yeah, you have to like really think about it sometimes. Like I was talking to one of my early investors, and we hadn't spoken in a very long time, probably before the pandemic, because he was one of those silent investors. But we were raising more capital, and one of the newer investors like backdoored, to get a conversation going to learn more about the company. And so he reached out to me, and he was like, I do this for a living, right? You could just send me the information, and I could review it and tell you, I could read the script to you because I wrote the script, right?
Right.
And so I was like, yeah, you're right. I forgot about that. But you have to really think about like who is in your network or who's close to you or who's like a 1 degree of separation.
I love that. Absolutely. So as SGI was growing, right, your business was growing, and you were signing a lot of contracts and you had a lot of clients, but you saw a gap in the marketplace and you decided to pursue it. What was the gap and what did you decide to do about it?
So I did something real crazy because people are like, well, SGI is growing, you're in these contracts, et cetera. And I started a whole nother business in tech, which is costly, right? It costs a lot to build software. And so I was like, nah, I think I could do this tech thing. See, that's me going back to my 20s. I was channeling my 20-year-old mind.
So you can go.
But I wasn't technical. And my marketing person at the time was like, hey, I know a guy out in San Francisco. And I flew out there and we created what is considered a specifications deck in wireframe. So almost like a business plan for what became Resilia. And I did something real crazy because the money that I was like making from SGI and I could have invested in all these things with, I took it and I dumped it into a whole new company. And I'm not talking about no little money either, like 7 figures, like a lot of money. And so that paid off later because I have so much equity in my company today. But I took a huge risk because I could have lost it all. Right? And so many times I was telling my friend, I was like, hey, if this don't work out, I ain't doing that again. I'm not doing that again. I can tell you that. But it worked out, and I'm happy I did it. And it was truly because SGI was going to be a good business, but it wasn't going to be a scalable business, and it wasn't going to be disruptive. And I felt like I wanted to create something that was disruptive.
Wow. How did you know, like, what were the factors that you determined that wouldn't allow it to be scalable?
So a few things. One, we were consultants, and so we were working with these large funders like Kellogg Foundation, Ford Foundation, helping their nonprofits. And so you just have a limitation on consultancy hours in general. And so I started thinking about, how can we productize our service and deliver it through a software solution, and thus being able to reach essentially hundreds of thousands, millions at one single time. And so that's what Resilia does today. And so SGI, whereas we had, a few dozen customers, we have over 20,000 customers and users on Resilia today.
Wow.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about exactly like the inner workings of what does Resilia do, right? Tell us a little bit about like how is it helping nonprofits? Like, Give us a little bit.
Yeah, so very similar to what we were doing at SGI, but now we do it through software. And so we're a SaaS technology platform, two-sided. So on one side, we support nonprofit organizations, essentially streamline their day-to-day operations, helping them build capacity, right? On the other side, we support large funders. So some of our funders are Goldman Sachs, Tom's, Patagonia, Bank of America.
Goodness.
We have like 12 United Ways on the platform. A lot of great foundations, corporations, state of Michigan, and government entities. And we essentially help them provide beyond the grant resources to the organizations, initiatives, and projects that they fund. And we help manage and track the data and reporting around where they give money and where they deploy capital.
Wow.
I wasn't doing that at SGI. I wasn't doing all that at SGI. But we kind of were, but as consultants, right?
Yeah,
and
right.
at a very smaller scale.
Absolutely. So I think one thing that's interesting about that is you built the MVP, right? And you put your own money into making sure you can get the first kind of inner workings of Resilia set up. And then you went and raised capital, right? Every statistic that we see says that it's very hard to raise money as Black folks. It's even harder to raise money as a Black woman.
Yes.
So what made you so successful at it? Because Sevetri, you've raised a lot of money.
Yeah, you know. We got a couple of dollars to keep things going. So the first capital I raised was a pre-seed round, about like $400,000. And it was actually done like locally in Louisiana through just angels and people who had known me through SGI.
Right.
And so they was like, oh, you did it once. I guess you might be able to do it again. I'll put some money, some money behind your company. I was like, okay, all right, we're going to get this going and we're going to do it. And so then we started getting some customers, and I was like, okay, we're going to have to raise more capital because that's the thing about building technology and software. You have to build essentially ahead of the market, and you're trying to capture a significant portion of the market. And so I went out and raised my seed round, which was probably one of my hardest rounds. And we raised a little bit over $2 million in that round. And the largest investor came from LA, actually, Mucker Capital. Shout out to Will, one of my favorite investors. And I met them through one of my other investors, and Will was like, oh yeah, I love the idea. We're going to put like $1 million in. And so, but it didn't start like that. He actually came in much later, but ended up being the largest investor in the round. It was actually Tim Milliken who set it ablaze from TPG Capital because I pitched at BNOW here in New Orleans, and I lost, by the way. And I lost the pitch competition, but the investors were like, you got a good business.
You got a good business. They were still interested, right?
They were still interested. And so on the side, one of the partners made an angel investment into the company. And because of who he was, I was able to use his name to raise more capital.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. I also love the fact that
So
you just shared a great lesson. Even if you don't win, sometimes you still win.
Yeah.
Sometimes you still win.
Yeah.
So the name Resilia, super unique. Where does it come from? What inspired you to go with that name?
So I don't know if it's true for everyone else, but it's so hard naming something. That's
It
one
is.
of the hardest things is like naming something. And we had brought consultants to the table. I mean, it was rough. We had all these consultants around the table. We had all these various different names. And I was just like, man, I'm not feeling any of this. And one night I went home and I was like, man, resilient. And I was like, I felt the customers and our users and our community was resilient. I felt the city we were in, New Orleans, was resilient, and Resilia was birthed out of that.
I love that. I love that it connects so much personally, right? Sometimes it is really hard to find a name, but I think when you can find something that connects back authentically to you and your story, you represent it more authentically, right? It's just that much more powerful.
Yeah, it's been working for us.
Yeah. One of the last questions I wanted to ask you, and I wanted to read you this quote. It's your own quote, and I wanted to get your reaction to it. I've never been afraid to start over, is the quote. How did you develop such a mindset? Because I feel like change and starting over can feel very daunting. How do you approach it in a way that you do where it feels just like a normal day?
Yeah. So something that I talk about with one of my mentors is the ability to deal with disappointment. And something that we always say is like, disappointment is certain. Disappointment is constant, but disappointment can be conquered. And I think about that when I hear that quote, right? Because a lot of the journey is how you deal with disappointment and how you're going to move forward, irregardless of what blocks you or stands in your way.
Wow.
And when I think about the ability to like, oh, if I fail, I'm going to get back up. Even if I got to cry first, I got to like whatever stomp and whatever, I'm going to still get back up, right?
Yeah.
And so I do have that type of like resiliency. And, I saw like somebody, like a meme that was going around, particularly during COVID. It's like, I'm tired of being resilient. Like, I don't want to be resilient. I'm trying to live a soft life. Like, this resilience is for the birds. And I hear you. I was like, I hear you.
I hear
but,
you.
Hey, it's definitely one of those characteristics that'll keep you going.
Yeah.
And truly, when you get knocked down, will help you get back up.
Help you get back up. Last question I wanted to ask you before you get off stage. What advice? We got a lot of folks here that are in something, want to start a business. What advice would you give them as they are going to embark on this journey? Yeah.
So I would say ensure you have the right people around you. People who are going to like push back, not be negative, right, but give constructive criticism. Because sometimes you have too much of one to left or right. People who praise everything you do, and you be like about to fall off a cliff, and they be like, "You got this.
You got it.
You need to turn around." And then you have people who are negative too, and it's hard for you to get anything going because they're tearing you down. And so you definitely have to put the right people around you. People who have potentially even done what you want to do and have had successes and failures, and that can help you walk you through it. And then finally, I'll just say something on a personal tip that my mother always told me, and that was, don't let your highs get so high you can't touch the ground, or your lows so low you can't see the heavens. And so that's just on a personal note from just being in business and going through this entrepreneurial journey and having to have that resiliency and like this staying power.
I love it. I love it.